Welcome to Cut to Legal.
Hello and welcome to Cut to Legal. I'm your host, Kevin Rosenquist, here with entertainment attorney James Pacitti, a veteran entertainment lawyer and founder of Pacitti Law Firm. He's represented producers, production companies, actors, directors, writers, you name it, at every level of the business, from indie features to documentaries, multi-platform projects. He's done it all. And after beginning his career as a trial attorney and litigator, he has transitioned to transactional entertainment law nearly 20 years ago. James, welcome back. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
So we're talking about how to protect your film in a distribution deal. Obviously, great. You got a distribution deal. That's amazing. But you got to protect it. First, let's start out by saying, what is a distribution agreement and when does a filmmaker need one?
Distribution agreement is simply an agreement between a filmmaker, producer, production company, and a distributor, granting the distributor rights to distribute the film in specific territories, over specific platforms or medium or media for specific periods of time. And a producer, production company, filmmaker, they will need this once they want to distribute their project beyond perhaps DIY types of distribution, because people, nowadays we have where people are, I guess you could say, technically distributing it on a YouTube channel, for example. But if you wanted on Netflix, if you wanted on Amazon Prime, if you wanted, or Amazon in general, or Apple, if you wanted to be in theaters, then you have to deal with a distributor.
What kind of rights do they typically, does the distributor typically ask for?
Well, all the agreements are different in some ways, but there are ways that they're all the same. As I was alluding to, you have territory, you have the media rights, the term, the length of it, sometimes language rights, sometimes merchandising derivative. But the main what you'll hear is territory, which is, for example, North America, which is United States and Canada, or foreign. And what the extent of that will vary deal to deal. And even within that, there can be rights carved up. Sometimes a distributor will take all rights. It's not common, but they might take all rights, which that can be theatrical, that can be PVOD, TVOD, premium video on demand, PVOD. There's also AVOD, which is advertised video on demand, SVOD, subscription video on demand. And then you also have the territories. So you have these various rights, but then those various rights in different territories, like I said, North America, and then outside of North America, where it's generally foreign, but it can also be amongst different distributors for, say, South America versus Europe versus Asia. So you're going to have those main terms are going to be about the territory and the media rights, and then you're going to get into a lot of other terms as well.
Is there a standard revenue split, that people start off at, or does it just vary by project?
It varies by distributor, and sometimes it can vary on a project. Distributors, it can take widely different fees depending on who you're dealing with. I've never seen a less than 20%, and I don't recall ever seeing a higher than 40%. So it's in that range. Okay. And it depends what you're talking about, just because, for example, when you're talking about theatrical, and you're talking about the exhibitors, which is like AMC, Regal Cinemas, for a studio film, they take 50% of the box office. They're not considered distributors, but just that's if you're going theatrical, they take 50% of the box office, and your distributor, if you actually hired a distributor, and they're going to take a big chunk of what's left. If it's an independent film, then the film rental, that being what the filmmaker gets, the producer production company gets, they only be 34 to 37% of the box office. So it varies very much. So theatrical is a different animal. But then when you're talking about some of these other media, like I was mentioning about SVOD, TVOD, PVOD, AVOD, et cetera, all these streaming essentially, those fees can, like I said, 20 to 40%. But then there's also expenses. There's always some expenses, marketing expenses, maybe ingestion fees, delivery costs. So that's part of the trickier areas for filmmakers is the expenses and costs that come off the top.
Yeah, I could see that. That's a lot of moving parts I didn't know existed.
Yes. The distribution is really tricky.
Yeah.
I've seen so many distribution agreements after the fact. I analogize screwing up your distribution agreement that those who like footballs running the ball all the way down to the 1 yard line and fumbling. Just you're
Which
about
happens.
yeah, it happens, it happens, and that's essentially what it is. That it's an incredible feat to produce a film that is ready to be delivered to a distributor, to develop it, to get the money, to go through production, to go through post production, to do all that, and then to get that far, and then to make a bad distribution deal. Like I said, it's to me, it's fumble the ball at the 1 yard line.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy. Sad, but a good analogy
It
nonetheless.
happens a lot.
I'm sure, because if you don't know what you don't know, and that's not to make a nice segue into your value, but that's why people like you do exist, right?
Yeah, again, it's self-serving, but it's also true because these distribution agreements are very tricky. And you and I have spoken in a prior conversation about overly broad and vague terms, and this is really dangerous in a distribution agreement because when you're defining what the distributor takes, because the money's going to come to the distributor, distributors dealing with sometimes a lot of sub distributors, they're the ones that the money's coming through. So they're taking their fee, and then they're going to be taking expenses. And the lack of clarity about the expenses they're allowed to take is one of the biggest issues.
Yeah.
About sometimes those fees, well, they might be called marketing expenses, they might be called distribution costs, however they're defined in the agreement. If they're uncapped, that is that's one of the biggest issues I've seen, that they're uncapped and they're unaccountable, and there's no audit rights. Then filmmakers, they're going to be in a lot of trouble because it's, I hate to say this, but it's almost as if it's a license to steal by the distributor because they can keep just deducting expenses. And you see a lot of filmmakers come to us after the fact and they're wondering why they're not making any money for their project.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you a question. I've heard of exclusive rights versus non-exclusive rights. What's the difference? What exactly do those terms mean?
Well, exclusive rights is an example of distribution agreement. The distributor is the only party that's able to exploit whatever media rights they have in whatever territory they have. So let's say a distributor has the exclusive rights to all media in North America. That means everything in the United States, Canada, that this distributor is the only one who can exploit it, whether it's theatrically, whether it's also streaming, whether it's airplanes and cruise ships and all of that. They're the only one. When it's non-exclusive, then multiple parties can exploit, whether it be rights that are non-exclusive or a territory. It's usually, that's how the exclusivity will work. It's either exclusivity in a territory or of rights. It's unusual to have that because a distributor doesn't want to be competing like, well, we're out here hustling trying to get these particular media rights exploited in this particular territory. Let's say Germany, for example. They're trying to sell something in Germany and then someone else at the same time is doing it. That's not going to happen too often. It usually will happen. It's almost always going to be exclusive. Non-exclusivity may occur after a period of time. Let's say after a year or two, and these are negotiable terms. A year or two, the producer, the filmmaker, the production company would say, hey, listen, if you haven't sold whatever territories, let's say they have the world, let's say they just have foreign. If you haven't sold, let's say, a bunch of European territories in a year or two, well, then we want it to be non-exclusive because if you're not selling it, we got to find someone to sell this territory because that's money that's not being, basically, unexploited opportunities.
So does that also play into when, you see like you'll see sometimes a movie will be on Max and then all of a sudden later it's on Netflix and then all of a sudden later it might be on Prime. Is that just changing the rights within that? Do they keep changing?
Well, it's what you can have is it's hard to say just based upon that, but those are different windows because you have a cable window, you have a stream. You can have these. For example, a film can go through a series of windows. It can be with different companies that go through that. You might be probably dealing with different parties. So, for example, maybe you go theatrical, and then after you go theatrical, you have one company that is securing your PVOD and TVOD and AVOD. And then you're going to go and do a separate deal with Netflix for your SVOD. And so they're all distributors, and because sometimes what will happen is one production, one film will have a sales agent that's engaging different parties for different windows because not everybody does everything. Netflix, for example, does not do theatrical, and so you often will have you'll have your domestic and you have your foreign. And your domestic is North America. Your foreign is everybody else. And so you're going to have this. But these are real different windows, because then it'll end up. Then eventually, at some point, it ends up on cable, on an HBO or a Cinemax or a Showtime, and then eventually it makes its way all the way down the broadcast, where you can see it on. You'll see it on, usually not an ABC, CBS, or NBC, but maybe you'll see it on FX. You'll see it on one of the cable stations.
Yeah, TNT or something like that.
Yeah,
Back in the day, ABC showed movies, but not so much anymore.
Yeah, it's and of course you hear, and of course nowadays YouTube just actually surpassed both broadcast and cable for TV viewing. So that's another where it can end up on YouTube, and also you can have direct to consumer, where a production might hold those rights, and then after a period of time, say through a website, they may then have people purchase the right to watch the film after it's gone through all these windows. So then that's one of the things. That's why it's important for filmmakers to understand, when you're doing distribution, you really got to have someone who knows what they're talking about, whether it's an attorney or a producer really knows it, because if you just give it all to one party, you give all the rights and all the territory, or whatever it might be, to one party. You want to maximize all your windows. When I was just talking about all the different windows, that there's money in each of them typically, and how much that is. That they're often interrelated. Like theatrical can help increase your streaming revenue, because theatrical, even though it might be a money loser in and of itself, because you got to spend P&A, print and advertising, to promote the film, you get reviews, you get awareness, awards possible, consideration and eligibility, and that creates awareness when it hits streaming. So it's interconnected, but these are all different ways that filmmakers can exploit, and not just filmmakers, but anyone who's creating content nowadays, because it is a very different landscape. It's all different potential ways that they can monetize their project.
Yeah, the window thing, I remember that a lot when I was a kid. It was theater, then it was video, then it was cable, then it was broadcast TV, and that's.
Oh, they're actually DVDs are still a thing too. It's not what it used to be. That's another one. Yeah,
I see them sometimes, and I'm like, who's buying these?
It's amazing. There are still people who are apparently buying it, because I'm still negotiating these deals for DVDs and Blu-ray. Okay. It's not what it used to be. It used to be extremely lucrative, when Blockbuster and Walmart was selling them and so forth. But now it still can be a revenue stream, but it's nothing compared to what it was.
I still have a cabinet full of DVDs that I don't know what to do with.
I'm not sure. I don't know if you can buy a DVD player nowadays.
Yeah, I know. I don't have one. I know that much. What are some other red flags that you advise producers, filmmakers, when it comes to distribution agreements? What are some red flags that you tell them to look out for?
Well, these agreements can be very complicated. They're very rarely the same. There's nothing standard. There are things that, obviously, like I mentioned, you're going to have territory, you're going to have the media. And what they have to look out for is, what are they giving up, and how long are they giving up for? And some of the biggest issues is that, what if the distributor is not performing? What's your recourse? Because what they don't consider is there any basis for termination? Is there any opportunity for reversion? Because you give this away, your project. Like I said, again, it's you've worked all of this, worked so hard and for so long to get it this far, and then you give all the rights to a party with no ability to get it back. So I think what you're talking about, it's really looking at it like, what if the worst case scenario happens? This just does not do well, because if they're not going to give you a minimum guarantee, or an MG as it's called, where a distributor will give you a nice chunk of money to ensure that, okay, you're at least making something from this. If the terms aren't clear, and this distributor has this in perpetuity, or an extraordinarily long period of time, like I've seen them where it's 25 years, where they have when they have all of the media, they have all the territory for an extremely long period of time, with really no reversion, with no provisions or clauses that provide for what would essentially be a default or a breach by the distributor, which could enable the contract to be terminated and the rights revert back. And there's also other things where I've seen they allow distributors to take liens or security interest in their film, when they didn't provide any kind of minimum guarantee or financing. So it's just there's a lot of, like I was saying, distribution is just it's wrought with peril. There's so many legal landmines, and there's some of the most complicated agreements and the least transparent of the agreements that we see in the entertainment industry, at least in my opinion. And so it's really important. As all agreements that anyone's entering into, they really should have someone who's knowledgeable about it. Obviously, an entertainment lawyer is preferred, but these distribution is wrought with peril, and the filmmakers have to be extremely careful because, like I said, yeah, they can get all that way and then drop the ball on the 1 yard line, and then their film it's with this party who has a contract. Going back to another discussion we had, just because the contract's unfair doesn't mean you can get out of it.
Right.
And you're stuck, and you're not likely to recoup your investors' money, let alone see a profit.
What is the biggest reason that you think, or that you find, that people sign these bad distribution deals? Is it just they're so excited that they got a distributor, or they don't, or lack of knowledge? What generally is the reason?
Yeah, I think it's a number of these things. Perhaps they get charmed,
Yeah.
and it sometimes maybe it's desperation. They see an opportunity and they start thinking about. They don't think about the implications of the terms of the agreement. So they'll see that, okay, the fee is X. So if it makes this amount of money, we're gonna make this amount of money, and they don't really look at the terms like, well, how are we really knowing how much money it's making?
Right.
Do we have audit rights? Well, what are our accounting rights? Well, what about the fees? How much are the fees? And what is the nature of those fees? Because sometimes you get companies that call themselves distributors who will just get as many projects as they can. They go to these film festivals and they're charging every one of these filmmakers a fee of, say, $5,000 each. They could be there with 20, 30, 40, 50 titles. And they're basically paying for their ability to go to all these markets and all these festivals and charging all these filmmakers as if each one of them is paying for them to be there just for their film. And it's not the case at all. They're one of many titles that they may have. So you have unscrupulous distributors who really aren't distributors. They're really glorified sales agents. And they convince these filmmakers who often, maybe they're naive, maybe they're desperate, they don't know any better, and they're too trusting. They don't have the agreements looked at by an attorney or properly scrutinized. And they end up giving the rights to their film worldwide, all media, and they end up seeing little or no money from it. And there's lots of reasons why. But some of them, I just mentioned, but every case is different.
Are there clauses that you encourage people to put in these contracts that can help them mitigate some of these problems?
Yeah, it's again, something one of my truisms is contracts. Obviously, the terms are very important, but also what's important is who you're contracting with. So it needs to be a reputable distributor or a sales agent, as it may be appropriate. But for example, you got to have specifics that expenses have to be capped. Their marketing expenses have to be capped, and any expenses that they do have to be verifiable. They have to be direct, verifiable expenses. So that way, they're not just using your film, someone's film, as a way to pay their overhead. So because then that leads to where it's important to have audit rights, because they can tell you, oh, it's not making any money, and you'll get the accounting reports quarterly, and they'll show all these numbers that indicates the revenue or lack thereof. But that's just numbers on a piece of paper. So to
Right.
truly be certain about it, you got to be able to audit them, and they'd be able to have a CPA or an accounting firm of your choosing get in there and really look at it, because this happens all the time. This happens with distributors who are the big studios. This is one of the biggest issues that comes up, where the distributor is claiming the movie's making no money. This happens constantly, and this is something that goes on in the entertainment industry constantly, whether it's with filmmakers and also with profit participants who are being told this movie that they'll see it made $500 million worldwide. Somehow they're not making any. There's no profits. So that is an issue across the entertainment industry, both for the producers and filmmakers and for profit participants like writers, producers, directors, and talent.
Yeah, you hear stories about that sometimes,
Yeah.
about some bad deals and not getting any money out of huge successes. It's sad, very sad.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for listening to Cut to Legal with James Pacitti. Visit PacittiLawFirm.com to learn more or to schedule a consultation. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. We really appreciate it. And leave us a review if you've got a second. James, always great chatting with you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.